Donald Trump appears to have changed his mind about Milwaukee, the city hosting the Republican National Convention next month. The former president proclaiming his love for the city in battleground Wisconsin yesterday, denying that he called it horrible in off-camera comments to Republicans last week on Capitol Hill.
I love Milwaukee. I was the one that picked Milwaukee, I have to tell you. I was the one that picked it. These lying people that they say, oh, he doesn't like Milwaukee. I love Milwaukee. I said, you got to fix the crime. We all know that. You got to make sure the election's honest. But I'm the one that picked Milwaukee, and the Democrats, or the radical left lunatics, as I call them, what they say is just so terrible.
NBC's Vaughn Hilliard joins us now for more on this. So, Vaughn, Trump had much more to say about Milwaukee yesterday. He was also pressed about whether he'll be staying there for the convention.
There were some questions about whether he was going to be staying at a Trump residence in Chicago and making that commute back and forth during the convention to Milwaukee. He is pushing back and saying that was never the case. A law enforcement source tells NBC News that he and the Secret Service had been looking at accommodations in Chicago so he could make that trip. But this, for Donald Trump, this is an issue, you could say, for his campaign, when behind closed doors he reportedly called Milwaukee terrible. Of course, you hear him pushing back. At the same time, there's a lot of folks outside of the major cities who, in a lot of ways, agree with the way that he describes places like Milwaukee or New York City or, Chicago. Back in 2020, before that election, he compared Chicago to Afghanistan. So Donald Trump has a penchant for blasting, these major American cities here. And yet for him, Milwaukee is a place that is going to be crucial in the general election in November. He won Wisconsin by just lost Wisconsin by just 20,000 votes back in 2020. Yeah,
Wisconsin, a key state for both campaigns. We know the Biden campaign is also doing outreach in Wisconsin this weekend, or coming up in the next 24 hours or so. Talk to us, Vaughn, about double haters. And I should note that we're learning more about this closely watched voting bloc who are unhappy with both the major party candidates, President Biden and Donald Trump. The voters could be crucial, major opportunity for the contenders, and the double haters of 2024 look different from the two previous elections. With us to discuss more on this, of course, Vaughn, but also two former members of Congress, Democrat Donna Edwards of Maryland and Republican Carlos Curbelo of Florida. But Vaughn, set the table here. When it comes to this group of double haters, what is different about this group as a whole this time versus past elections, and what's the potential impact?
Right. When you look at the numbers this time around, there is reticence towards Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And back in 2020, right, there was excitement, more enthusiasm. And when you just look at these numbers here, it makes it clear what sort of that reticence can look like here, and the number of folks that say they don't want either of these individuals. And if you go back to 2020, right, Democrats were eager, enthusiastic to get Donald Trump out of the White House. And, Joe Biden was somebody who said, look, vote for me once here, then we can go and get rid of the Republican who is currently occupying up on Pennsylvania Avenue. And this time is a little bit more like 2016, though, because you have third-party candidates. You have the likes of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Cornel West, Jill Stein. And so there are other options, unlike in 2020, for those double haters to go to. And that is why you see not only Trump's campaign, but Biden's campaign also trying to urge their supporters and saying, look, if we just take RFK, for example, you see the Trump campaign saying he's a radical leftist, right? If you consider yourself conservative, don't go to him. And then on the other side, you hear the Biden campaign saying he's essentially the equivalent of Donald Trump, right? He's anti-vax, he's radical, he's extreme, he's somebody that buddies up with the likes of Elon Musk and other right-wing propagandists. And so it is an effort by both sides to convince their base of, these double haters to not go to one of the third options, but instead stick with them, even if you're not all that into us.
And can we put that graphic back up? Because what is notable is that in 2016, you can see a lot more of these double haters are traditionally Republican voters. 2020, it flipped to the majority being traditionally Democratic voters who said that they didn't like either candidate. But this year, 2024, it's almost a three-way split there, you can see, with Democrats, Republicans, and Democrats being among these double haters. So, Congresswoman Edwards, what kind of power could this group have in November, these double haters?
Well, I think substantial. And I mean, one of the things that stood out to me in this analysis is that 67% of these double haters really don't like the Donald Trump felony convictions. And so that actually provides a real opportunity, I think, for the Biden campaign. But the truth is that you can already see these both candidates jockeying for this group. They are incredibly persuadable, which is unusual in a year where Biden's team in particular has to work on persuading what used to be kind of a Democratic base.
Congressman Curbelo, do you agree that these double haters are persuadable?
Well, I think that the double haters will take their cues from the candidates as we get closer and closer to the election. And if one of the two candidates has another major scandal, a major gaffe, an embarrassing moment, that could tilt these voters. But I think the other big point here that has to be underscored is that RFK, Robert Kennedy, could be the difference maker in this race. This is not going to be a third-party candidate like some of the ones we've seen in recent years that maybe get half of a percentage of the national vote, half a percentage point of the national vote. RFK could end up getting 3, 4, 5, 6, but who knows, up to 10% of the national vote, and that could really be decisive in some key states.
Well, we know President Biden and Donald Trump will have a chance to really speak to these voters, all voters, at this debate coming up next week. And Senator J.D. Vance, potential Trump VP pick, was on Fox News last night and was asked about Trump's debate prep. Watch this.
So, debate prep is really, I think, at least in my limited experience with him, he's thinking about how to translate these really, really important topics into a message that works. And obviously, he's as good at it as anybody. That's why he's leading all the polls.
So Vance Vaughn seemed to indicate that Trump was focused more on policy going into this debate, and that may be the expectation for the viewers or audience here. Is there an indication that he's focusing on policy over theatrics?
Look, I think Donald Trump is his most unvarnished self than ever right now. And I think that this is somebody who has been eager to go toe-to-toe with Joe Biden and make the comparison between the two men. So I'm not sure if we'll see less theatrics necessarily. But in terms of that debate prep, look, J.D. Vance, we're told, was one of the individuals who had a meeting with Donald Trump recently. For them, they talked about economic policy, we're told by a Trump campaign source. Donald Trump has met with other individuals like Kellyanne Conway to have other conversations about other policy issues here. This is different than normal debate prep, though. 4 years ago, he was sparring with Chris Christie, who stood in as Joe Biden ahead of the first 2020 presidential debate. So this time we're told that it's a little bit different and that this is a moment that Donald Trump has been preparing for by going on the campaign stage, doing right-wing media interviews. And so this is a little bit different, I think, than a normal presidential debate in terms of prep that we're used to.
Different in terms of prep, different in terms of format also. Congressman Curbelo, what risks do you see both Biden and Trump maybe facing going into the debate?
Well, and I'll tell you this, if Donald Trump is going to focus on policy, that's bad news for him. The policy environment is not one in which Donald Trump thrives. Where he thrives is saying popular things, personally attacking his opponent. That's really when he does score some points. So I don't expect much policy. And again, I think at these debates, the audience is going to be very narrow. We know most of the country has already decided. So these candidates are going to be focusing on these swing voters in swing states. And a lot of these are people who have voted Republican and Democrat, gone back and forth in recent years. So again, any overly aggressive conduct at the debate, any major gaffe by President Biden, moment of weakness, I mean, these are the kinds of moments that could really shift small number of voters and determine the outcome of this race.
Congresswoman Edwards, we've seen some efforts lately from the Biden campaign to draw more specific contrasts with Trump, particularly on things like the Trump tax cuts. What's the best way to do that at the debate?
Well, I think it's really important for the president to focus on the things that are incredibly popular with the American people. Abortion rights and access to contraceptives. This is an area where Biden has some decided strength among the electorate. And I think it's important to highlight those differences. Also, I think you've got to throw, President Biden has to throw Donald Trump's words right back at him. And I think it's been important for the president to draw a contrast on whether you want a convicted felon or you want somebody who's going to bring order and chaos and continue the progress for the American people, focused on the American people. So I think there's a real opportunity for President Biden to show that he is a sort of steady as you go, non-chaos candidate. I think there's also every opportunity for Donald Trump to kind of go off the rails depending on what the questioning polls. And so even though a lot of people may not be watching this, a lot of people will be watching the analysis of it after the fact. So both candidates have to tread pretty carefully.